May 26, 1941. Somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean, a slow aircraft drifted through thick clouds, scanning thousands of square kilometers of empty sea. For days, the British Royal Navy had been searching for the most dangerous battleship in the world, the German battleship Bismarck. Dozens of warships had failed to find it. Then one aircraft spotted a dark silhouette cutting through the waves. A short radio message was sent. Within hours, the course of one of World War II's greatest naval hunts had changed forever. That aircraft wasn't a famous fighter or a heavy bomber. It was the consolidated PBY Catalina, a flying boat designed to patrol oceans for hours where no other aircraft could. This is the story of one of the most versatile aircraft ever built. During the early 1930s, the United States Navy faced a serious challenge. The Pacific Ocean was enormous, and existing patrol aircraft simply couldn't fly far enough to protect American interests. Enemy fleets could cross vast stretches of ocean without ever being seen. The Navy needed something completely different. It wanted an aircraft that could fly farther than any patrol aircraft before it, remain in the air all day, operate hundreds of miles from land, and even land on the sea if necessary. Several manufacturers competed for the contract, but one company stood out. Consolidated Aircraft proposed an entirely new flying boat with exceptional range and endurance. The prototype first flew in 1935 and immediately impressed Navy officials. After several improvements, it entered production as the PBY. The name Catalina was actually introduced by the Royal Air Force after Britain ordered the aircraft before the United States officially adopted the same nickname. Soon, the Catalina was being built not only in America, but also in Canada and the Soviet Union under license. By the end of production, more than 3,300 aircraft had been built, making it one of the most successful flying boats in history. At first glance, the Catalina looked unusual. Its boat-shaped hull allowed it to take off from and land directly on water. Small retractable floats folded neatly into the wings during flight, reducing drag while providing stability on the surface. Mounted above the fuselage was a massive parasol wing that kept the engines high above sea spray. Power came from two reliable Pratt & Whitney R1830 twin Wasp radial engines. Together, they produced enough power to carry bombs, depth charges, mines, fuel, ammunition, and a crew of up to 10 men. The Catalina wasn't fast. Its maximum speed was only around 315 kilometers per hour, far slower than most fighters. But speed had never been its mission. Its greatest weapon was endurance. Depending on the mission, a Catalina could remain airborne for 15 to 20 hours and patrol thousands of kilometers without refueling. Very few aircraft of its time could stay over the ocean for so long. That ability made it an ideal set of eyes for the Allied navies. The Catalina was designed to perform almost every task imaginable over water. It could search for enemy fleets far beyond the horizon. It hunted submarines using depth charges. It escorted merchant convoys across the Atlantic. It bombed coastal targets. It laid naval mines. It transported cargo and personnel. It evacuated wounded soldiers. And perhaps most importantly, it rescued survivors from the sea. Its large hull allowed crews to pull exhausted sailors directly aboard, something ordinary land-based aircraft could never do. Because of this, many airmen and sailors owed their lives to the Catalina. Among Allied crews, it earned a reputation not only as a patrol aircraft, but also as a lifesaver. Flying a Catalina required far more than 2 pilots. Depending on the mission, the crew usually consisted of 7 to 10 men. Each had a specific responsibility. The pilots controlled the aircraft during long hours over featureless oceans. The navigator constantly calculated the aircraft position using maps, compasses, stars, and dead reckoning. Long before GPS existed, even a small navigational mistake could leave the crew hundreds of kilometers off course. The radio operator maintained communication with naval headquarters, often becoming the only link between distant patrols and Allied fleets. Flight engineers carefully monitored both engines throughout flights that sometimes lasted nearly an entire day. Meanwhile, gunners stood watch inside transparent blisters on each side of the fuselage, scanning the sea for submarines or enemy aircraft. Every crew member depended on the others. A Catalina functioned less like a fighter aircraft and more like a small flying ship. The Catalina's greatest test came in the spring of 1941. After sinking the British battlecruiser HMS Hood, the German battleship Bismarck disappeared into the Atlantic. It was one of the largest and most heavily armed warships ever built, and if it reached the safety of occupied France, it could continue threatening Allied shipping. For nearly 2 days, British forces lost contact with the battleship. Warships searched in the wrong direction. Aircraft returned without success. Time was running out. On the morning of May 26, 1941, a Royal Air Force Coastal Command PBY Catalina, piloted by Flying Officer Dennis Briggs, continued searching over the empty Atlantic despite poor weather and limited visibility. Then, through a break in the clouds, the crew spotted a massive warship below. There was no doubt. It was Bismarck. The Catalina immediately transmitted its position to the Royal Navy. Within hours, British forces closed in. Later that evening, Fairey Swordfish torpedo bombers launched their attack, damaging the battleship's rudder and leaving it unable to escape. The following day, Bismarck was surrounded and sunk. The Catalina did not fire the final shot. It did something even more important. It found the target. Without that discovery, one of the most famous naval operations of the Second World War could have ended very differently. But this was far from the Catalina's only historic achievement. The Catalina became one of the Allies' most effective submarine hunters. Flying slow and low over the ocean, its crews searched for the slightest sign of a periscope, an oil slick, or a submarine traveling on the surface. Once a target was found, the aircraft could attack immediately with depth charges or guide nearby naval forces to the enemy's position. Many U-boats that believed they were safe were surprised by a Catalina appearing overhead. Its long endurance allowed it to patrol areas that other aircraft simply could not reach, closing what had once been known as the Atlantic Gap, a region beyond the range of most land-based patrol aircraft where German submarines had previously operated with relative freedom. The Catalina's missions were not limited to combat. By the end of World War II, the Catalina had served on nearly every major ocean. It had flown millions of kilometers, escorted convoys, hunted submarines, located enemy fleets, rescued survivors, transported personnel, and supported special operations across multiple continents. Even after the war, its career was not over. Many Catalinas continued flying for decades with military and civilian operators around the world. They fought forest fires, carried cargo to remote regions, performed maritime patrols, conducted scientific expeditions, and remained in search and rescue service long after newer aircraft had entered service. A number of them are still airworthy today, reminding new generations of an aircraft that refused to disappear. The Catalina was never the fastest aircraft of World War II. It never outflew a fighter. It never carried the heaviest bomb load. Yet none of those things defined its purpose. Its strength was endurance. Its weapon was patience. And its greatest victories came not from speed, but from being exactly where it was needed, when no one else could be. History remembers famous fighters for winning dogfights. It remembers powerful bombers for destroying cities. But over the endless oceans of World War II, there was another aircraft quietly changing the course of history. The consolidated PBY Catalina didn't seek glory. It simply did its job better than almost any aircraft of its generation. And that is exactly why, more than 80 years later, the Catalina remains one of the greatest flying boats ever built.